Hello, this is Minato speaking. Fanfics in English. This fanfic belongs to Vegan Master. Leave a like and subscribe if you enjoy the content I bring to the channel. Chapter 1. Dying isn't fun. It was a typical autumn evening for Allan. After finishing the latest chapter of One Piece, he went for a run. Many things were on his mind, like when does the next chapter come out? Or, I wonder if eating ramen for dinner is considered healthy. The park was fairly empty at this time of day. The shopping district was quite far from his house, and the park was right between the two. He started jogging because it took him 40 minutes just to walk to the store. This way, he got his exercise and did his shopping at the same time. He lived alone, worked as a freelancer, and spent most of his free time reading novels and watching anime. He also played games, but the first two took priority over most of his other hobbies. He had very few friends and was an orphan. He always felt he didn't need much of a family. He was happy as he was now, working hard, having his own apartment, and spending his free time doing what he loved most. As he ran, he didn't notice the swirling clouds. Through the music in his headphones and the sound of his own steady breathing, he remained oblivious to the faint darkness enveloping the sky. Rain wasn't unusual, but anyone paying attention to these clouds would run for cover. Thunderstorms are never pleasant to be caught out on the street with little to no protection. What finally drew his attention to the sky was a loud cracking sound. He shook the headphones off his head. Looking up, he could see the biggest storm he'd ever witnessed brewing in the clouds. He had nowhere to hide. Looking around, he realized he was closer to the shopping district than to his house, so he started running toward it, hoping to find an open store. As he ran, he began to feel the force of the storm's winds. The trees bent down, leaning into the clouds. What remained of the leaves fell, covering the road with a thick, yellowish carpet. Everything was happening too fast. There was little time to react when a resounding crackk rang out. One of the largest trees couldn't hold on any longer, and, luckily, it fell right on top of Allan. He tried to jump out of the way, but he was too slow. It knocked him down. The size of the tree was too much for him. So he lay there, reeling from the impact and screaming as he was crushed by the enormous tree. He began to hear more and more trees falling. Some crashed down on the largest tree, applying more and more pressure to his lower body. Many fell all around him. It was a miracle none of them landed on his head. Many thoughts raced through his mind. He was panicking and quickly losing hope. Then he heard a crack of lightning. He didn't know which tree it struck, but he could smell something burning. Slowly, the fire pierced the dry branches of the trees, crushing his body. When the fire did, all he could do was flail his hands, hoping to escape. But fate had other plans. He felt the fire. The trees around him became like a bonfire, with him in the middle. It hadn't started to rain yet, but it was already too late. Just like that, the fire slowly devoured him. Screaming and praying didn't help. Chapter 2. Encounter with God. Allan awoke screaming in his mind, but there was no voice to accompany his urge to scream in terror. Opening his eyes, he saw that the stars surrounded him, their ends stretching as far as the eye could see. The stars seemed to part in one direction, as if urging him to follow the path they had opened before him. This feels incomplete. Why am I here? The last thing I remember is pain. I was trapped beneath those trees. I think I fell unconscious. Looking down, he realized he had no legs or arms. He was a formless drop of light. Here, he couldn't feel any pain. He couldn't feel anything at all. In fact, he could only float. Without further ado, he headed in the direction the stars indicated. What else could he do? Stay there for eternity? He wanted to see what was happening. He must have walked for what seemed like years. Perhaps it was anticipation, the hope of new life, curiosity about what lies beyond. Regardless of what had initially stirred his mind, he was now growing weary. He couldn't, of course, but his mind needed rest. He had time to contemplate many things about himself and his surroundings. He had long since come to terms with his impending death, though he tried to forget some parts of it, like the fact that not many people had noticed his disappearance, and that by the time his body was found, it would be burned beyond recognition. His identification wasn't exactly a sure thing either, so he assumed his body wouldn't even be recognized. Sometime during his journey across this endless expanse of stars, He began to sense things around him, perceiving things without looking at them. Like a die-hard fan, he recognized the similarities between this and observation hockey. It obviously wasn't hockey by any stretch of the imagination. But as an otaku, there was no way he could call anything else. He could reach far and wide. Countless stars were within his perception, each representing a star system. A majestic scene of infinite splendor, all for his figurative eyes to enjoy. He could feel the stars around him diminishing in number. Now he could sense a presence before him. He had reached the end of his journey. The presence was grand, too vast to be fully encompassed by his perception compared to the surrounding stars. After a time of stillness, it spoke, communicating through thought. "And why are you here, little one? No mortal soul can survive in this place." It had been a while since he had spoken. After composing himself, Allan replied thoughtfully, "I don't know. I just exist, perhaps to enjoy the view. After all, if such a magnificent being couldn't comprehend his own mortality, how could he? And who are you? God, perhaps," he continued, curious. "In a sense, I am God. Creation originated with me. However, I only observe. The only time I interfered was to begin the process of gathering energy to form what humans call the Big Bang." It took Allan a moment to process that, but he wasn't really religious anyway, so he got over it quickly. "So, what's going to happen to me? What happens after a human dies?" "Usually, when one of your kind dies, their memories are erased, and their soul is sent to reincarnate. For some reason, yours just wandered off here. However, your soul will retain its memories regardless of what happens next. Can't you send me to a world of my choosing? I've seen many familiar ones on my way here." That's right. On his way here, Allan saw many worlds similar to his own, but also many that he had thought were fictional. He assumed the chances of the worlds being the same as in the anime/manga were infinitesimal. However, among an infinite number of stars, some were destined to be exactly as depicted. God pondered for a while. Then suddenly he spoke. "This is the first time I've interacted with my creation. I'll help you this time. After all, you're a curiosity. None of us can explain your existence. I can send you to a world of your choice. This is the first time something like this has happened. Your soul is too strong to be carried by a baby. However, I could transmigrate you into a grown body. I imagine a 10-year-old human would work. Very well. Choose the world and timeline you wish." After Allan paused for a moment, he decided against choosing a place. That world was as beautiful as it was dangerous, something a fan of the show like him would know. Allan finally made up his mind, choosing the world of My Hero Academia, 6 years before Midoriya entered UA. He chose this world because he wanted a somewhat peaceful life. Besides that, there was the fact that he found. It was interesting. He also wanted some excitement in his new life. God found him instantly. After all, you could assume his perception extended everywhere in this place. That was the reason you were guided here. I see that the world you've chosen relies somewhat on power. I will grant you one. Choose wisely. Allan instantly decided on the Pika Pika no Mi. He discovered it was one of the strongest powers in a single piece. He also discovered that Keizuru's personality was similar to his own. They both always strove to do the bare minimum. I can grant you that power. I will integrate it into that world, just for you. Enjoy your time alive. Until we meet again, I will be watching over you. And so, everything went dark. Chapter 3. A New Beginning. I woke up in an alley in the middle of the night, and instantly my mind was flooded with the memories of a 10-year-old orphan with no peculiarities, also named Allan. His parents had been here on a road trip and tragically died in a car accident when he was 5. In old Allan's memories, only his parents existed, and no one from his family ever came near him, so I could only assume he had none. That's fine with me. Getting attached to someone would be quite difficult. After all, this body may be young, but my soul certainly wasn't. Even before I wandered endlessly among the stars, I was already 27 years old. As for why I was in an alley, old Allan was left here to die after being stabbed by some random villain. The villain was probably just some random psychopath. At the very least, I should try to avenge the former host of this body. Fortunately, I remember his face in detail, as terrified as the boy was during those moments. I can easily analyze the memories. As for why a child would be wandering the streets so late, in short, he was bullied. The children from the orphanage managed to lock him out at night, closing the front gate. The wall was too high for a child to climb. The old woman who ran it probably didn't notice. It wasn't unusual. Making sure every child was in their place is the job of our group supervisor, who is also a bully. Old Allan didn't have a strong will since he was just a child. While other children can be cruel, at least the old woman from the orphanage was kind, but she couldn't do much to stop the bullying, even if she noticed it. But enough looking back for now. As I began to stand, I extended my observation hockey as far as I could around me, which was about 20 meters. I was being limited by my body. However, even this was a lot, considering I was still only 10 years old. I didn't need to worry about running out of willpower while using it. My soul could extend its perception very far, absorbing countless amounts of information at once. Now, 20 meters was my limit. The next thing I tried was to become light. The concept of using powers didn't come naturally to me. After all, I come from a world where such things only exist in fiction. But surprisingly, all I had to do was force my body to become light. As I watched, my closed fist became a yellow glow. As I moved my hand, my eyes could barely follow it. For some reason, the light wasn't blinding me. It was actually calming me. After experimenting for a while, turning different parts of my body into light and moving at high speeds, obviously banging my head against some walls, I managed to get used to my speed. Like Kizuru, the Pika Pika no Mi was too powerful for my brain to keep up with, as it wasn't used to moving at such speeds. The speed and information overload were difficult to process. This is where I realized one of the problems with this power. God had said he would integrate the power into this world, which means he turned the devil fruit into a quirk, which could be copied and or stolen by other quirks. So I needed to be wary of that kind of quirk. On another note, the quirk worked exactly like a Logia-type devil fruit would, whereas before I was banging my head against walls and wasn't hurt at all. This means I don't need to worry about any conventional methods of attack, aside from the quirk suppression bullets. Leaving the alley, I started heading toward my temporary home, the orphanage. I doubted I'd find my killer anytime soon. I'd familiarize myself with my own power before hunting him down. When I arrived at the orphanage, I simply transformed into light and flew straight up the brick wall, then to the right, landing on the ground. My landing kicked up a bit of dust, but thankfully I wasn't hurt at all, one of the perks of having a Logia quirk. The dormitory door was always open. Making my way to my room quietly and slipping into bed wasn't difficult. Observation hockey helped a little. Using it to navigate in the dark was simple. When I reached my bed, I drifted off to sleep, my mind as tired as my small body. Chapter 4. Training and Quirk. Time skip 1 year. A year has passed since I arrived in this world. The first thing I did was go to the doctor and register my quirk. I didn't really show its full power. I may have left out the fact that I'm virtually invincible from my official file. I also didn't mention that I could move at nearly the speed of light. The name of the quirk was Light because I was feeling lazy that day, and it's described as an emitting quirk that allows me to release light from different parts of my body. Although it raised some questions after a few inquiries, my case was simply classified as a rare late awakening. It was just a clean case, so they didn't investigate further. One thing I didn't realize when I woke up was that I was very tall for a 10-year-old boy, standing around 1.7 meters, 5 feet 7 inches. That was probably one of the reasons for the bullying. I was unusual, after all. I was tall and skinny, which was to be expected, really. You can assume old Allan wasn't really into weight training as a kid, which left me looking like a smaller, thinner version of Slender Man, with appropriately sized hands. I've been training my power and body for a while now. I started training to strengthen my body a few weeks after coming here, after realizing that having a weak body somewhat limited both my hockey and my quirk. My stamina isn't infinite. I can't use my powers too much without getting tired. At first, simply turning parts of my body into light was exhausting, but now I can do it easily. Creating powerful blasts is still difficult. I can only create small ones, and even those can tire me out after a dozen blasts. I just followed a simple exercise routine, mainly because to begin with I never liked exercise. I just did the standard stuff, running, push-ups, squats, and so on. This helped me get a little bigger. Not much. After all, I'm still only 11. Being an orphan meant I didn't have access to any gym equipment, so I couldn't do much weight training besides picking up trash in Dagoba Beach Municipal Park. I didn't try to clean it up. That's not my job. As I get used to my body, my hockey slowly expands. Now I can cover about 100 meters at any given time. I use it unconsciously. It's become the norm since I never run out of willpower because of my strengthened soul. After finishing my workout on the beach, it was already dark. As I walked back to the orphanage, I can't stop thinking about the bullies I met when I first came into this world. I only scared them a little, and now they don't even look near me. I'm still an adult, after all. I can't go around hitting kids. I just sent a small beam of light near them. I still couldn't create massive explosions like Kizaru. I'm still working on that. The small beam still kicked up some dust and startled them. As I reached the corner of the street, I heard a scream from a nearby alley. Oh well, it had to happen eventually. It was still the world of My Hero Academia. Villains were common here, and walking around at night was just asking for trouble. As I walked through the narrow alley, I could see a salaryman on the ground, struggling while a four-armed villain stood over him, pummeling him. The villain clearly intended to continue until the victim stopped moving completely. Now, I really couldn't ignore this. If a murder happened on my route, the police would start patrolling the area more frequently, which would make my peculiar training more difficult. I simply raised my finger in the direction of the villain and fired a concentrated beam of light at his back. It caused a small explosion, instantly knocking him off his victim. He was about to fire another shot, but apparently the man was already unconscious. The salaryman was stunned and confused. He couldn't really see my face, so I simply transformed into a beam of light and escaped between the buildings. Going upstairs would only draw more attention to this place. I didn't want to get arrested for using my quirk, but I still called the police from a nearby payphone and gave them the villain's location. They just chalked this up to a vigilante, and even then, it attracted less attention than the murder. I really didn't feel like staying, so I went to my bedroom and drifted off into dreamland. Chapter 5. Vigilante. The next morning, while watching the news, I saw the man from that night being interviewed at the hospital. He tried his best to describe me, but it was too dark, so he couldn't give any facial features. The police deemed my actions dangerous and reckless, treated it as an isolated incident, and started building a file on me for vigilantism. Sitting on the couch in the orphanage's common area, I turned off the TV and got ready to go for a workout. Being considered a vigilante didn't bother me. I didn't think they could get any information about me from last night's encounter. Heading to the park, I started jogging. You'd think that after my past life experiences with parks, I'd never set foot in one again, but I had nowhere else to go. I could use the shade of some trees to practice my quirk and the metal bars in the playground for pull-ups. After that, I went to the beach to practice projecting my light beams toward the ocean. It was less destructive this way. I've been trying to replicate Yasukani no Magatama, an attack Kizaru used, crossing his arms in front of him and using both hands to fire a torrent of lethal light particles. I couldn't do it as well as him. Obviously, you need to be more proficient in using the devil fruit. Using my weak version already left me breathless. Other moves I tried to replicate are Ama no Murakumo. I couldn't solidify my light enough to turn it into a sharp blade. At most, I could make it into a pointed stick. An Amaterasu, blinding my enemies with a beam of light. I needed to work on my aim for that one. Observation hockey helped a lot. The only ability I can replicate without falling to my knees and gasping for air is Yada no Kagami, sending a beam of light forward, reflecting it off surfaces, and then transforming into light to reach where I want. The movement seemed almost instantaneous. Finishing my unusual training, I used Yada no Kagami to climb a building and start running, from building to building, practicing parkour and observing the alleyways below. After a while, I smelled something burning. Looking around, I spotted smoke coming from a nearby apartment building. Without thinking twice, I ran in that direction, reaching the building opposite the one that was on fire. Looking down, I could see people panicking and calling the authorities to deal with the fire. I quickly decided to search the building using my hockey. Having died in a fire before, I didn't want others to go through that. I could sense someone trapped in a bathroom inside an apartment. Using Yada no Kagami, I launched myself into the building, navigating the beam of light to reach the bathroom door using my hockey. The interior was filled with smoke. I quickly tore the sleeves of my tracksuit, using one to cover my mouth and nose and preparing another for the person inside. When I opened the door, I saw a little girl. Her eyes were large and round, their irises a warm brown. Her hair reached her shoulders and was roughly the same color as her eyes, short and curled inwards at the ends. This was, if I remember correctly, Achiko Uraraka, a much younger version of herself. Anyway, I couldn't really sit there for long. I could feel her fear even through the thick smoke that filled the room. I quickly used my sleeve to cover her face and ran out of the house through a window. I couldn't use Yada no Kagami, so I grabbed the side of the building. Using Ama no Murakumo, I dug into the building. Although I couldn't sharpen it, I could still use it like a pointed stick, driving it through the building and letting it absorb most of my momentum. When I reached the ground, I carefully lowered Achiko. I could see her parents in the distance, carrying bags. They were probably out buying groceries when this happened. When they saw the fire, they quickly dropped all their bags and ran to their daughter. I quickly became a flash of lightning and took off running. Although meeting some of the main cast seemed nice, staying would be problematic. When I reached a dumpster, I quickly threw away my ripped tracksuit and got rid of my makeshift face mask. On the way home, I was somewhat tired and extremely nervous, hoping I wouldn't be recognized. POV narration. All the people running out of the apartments could see was smoke. Most were panicking, calling ambulances and firefighters. Everyone was hoping a hero would appear. Their prayers were answered when the most appropriate hero for this situation appeared almost instantly. Backdraft was most likely already in the area. He quickly began to extinguish the fire. The fires were spreading. Out of the corner of his eye, he caught a flash of light, a beam heading toward the building. It vanished in a second. No one else seemed to have noticed it. Then he heard a window shatter, saw a young man holding an even younger girl as she jumped out of a window, and prepared to try and catch them in a stream of water, hoping to break their fall. Fortunately, there was no need, as the young man materialized what appeared to be a sword of pure light and slowed his own descent by plunging it into the building. Backdraft quickly focused on the fires, hoping to extinguish them. After a while, he managed to do so, but the young man was gone. The girl was in the arms of those he assumed were her parents, crying and coughing. He wanted to thank the young man. What he had done couldn't really be considered illegal, just reckless. The most that could happen was a fine and a few days of community service. I hoped the police wouldn't be too harsh on a young man when they caught him. Chapter 6. Cleaning up the trash. 2 months have passed since that incident. The police couldn't identify me, but they managed to link this case to the salaryman's. Little by little, a profile began to emerge for them. A young man with a quirk that allowed him to move at great speed and control light. That didn't make me feel threatened. They're looking for a man. There's no way they know I'm just a very tall, 11-year-old boy. After a few weeks, their investigation still hadn't gone anywhere. Meanwhile, I continued training, only using my quirk when no one could see me. Hiding like this is really difficult, especially since surveillance cameras are quite common these days. Slipping through back streets undetected is tough, but it ensures good training for my observation hockey, so I can't complain. After training my quirk for a while, I finally managed to master it. I couldn't hit anything at the speed of light, though. Unlike Kizuru, I wasn't an absolute beast when it came to physical power. If I tried, I'd hurt myself more than my enemy. Besides, devil fruits are easy to control with enough practice, and I don't need some short old man telling me how to use my power. Currently, the strongest kick I could deliver was enough to split a tree in half, but it hurt a lot. When I tested my limits, I did so by slowly increasing the speed of the kick until I almost broke my leg on a tree. My limits would change as I got stronger, so I wasn't too worried about that. I also needed to concentrate to make my kick solid. In the last few weeks, I've also taken up another hobby. It led me to carry some more practical tools, like a rope. In front of me was a masked man hanging upside down from a fire escape. He'd only tried to rob another civilian. I tied him upside down after knocking him out with a kick to the temple. I didn't really care much about the safety of villains. I despised them. I would always act without any consideration for others. Some might have excuses, but many are just scum. Like the one in front of me. The least they could do was give me some battle experience. Even then, I need to completely suppress my haki while fighting them. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to do anything. To conceal my face, I only wear a pair of gold and amber sunglasses and a fake beard. For my disguise, I just wore a yellow suit and white shoes. Obviously inspired by Kizaru himself. The police noticed my activity and gave me the nickname Yellow Flash for obvious reasons. At least they didn't call me Kizaru, which means yellow monkey. I only operate at night, using my time wisely. I never spend more than 2 hours hunting villains. I still need to rest. My body is still growing. Anyway, after checking for cameras with haki, I use Yada no Kagami to reach a payphone and tell the police the location of the subdued villains. My nights usually end here, but as I headed toward the orphanage, I noticed a distinct metallic smell. It was definitely blood. I activated my haki to its maximum and saw a man being stabbed in the middle of the street. Without hesitation, I transformed into a beam of light, reflecting my path behind the attacker, and used the powerful Amma no Murakumo to deliver a swift blow to his side, sending the villain crashing into a wall. The villain was most likely seriously injured at this point, but I didn't have time to worry about him. I quickly found the victim on a phone and called an ambulance and the police. After doing that, I glanced at the obviously deranged villain. He hadn't bothered to cover his face. He looked familiar, so I approached him. I now recognized him as the one who murdered old Allan. I decided to make sure he was stopped. I wasn't going to kill him. That wasn't a good way to achieve justice. With my haki, I sensed him twitch. Apparently, he wasn't injured enough. When I was just a few steps away, hands in my pockets, he lunged at me. I looked at him with disdain. Did he think I was an idiot? Laughing maniacally, he tried to stab me in the chest. I didn't even bother to react. He had a look of crazed euphoria when he saw his knife about to pierce my chest. That look quickly turned to confusion when he felt little resistance as the knife entered my chest. I simply lifted my leg and crushed his head down with my heel. I used just enough force to knock him out. The man clearly had some kind of strength/enhancement quirk. He had undoubtedly injured himself before, but a normal man would have been hospitalized. Afterwards, after making sure the villain wouldn't get up, I heard sirens and booked him. I definitely didn't want to deal with the police. Unbeknownst to me, a camera captured the entire exchange. Chapter 7. Business as usual. When I got home, my hand started hurting more and more. I'd used a lot of force hitting that villain with Amma no Murakumo. My grip strength was pushed to its limit. I didn't realize it at the time because of the adrenaline, but luckily it wasn't anything serious. However, I probably ruptured some of his organs with it. I'm pretty sure the only reason he could keep moving was because of the adrenaline and the madness. I changed out of my suit and put in a bag I'd hidden in an alley near the orphanage. I went to the common area and turned on the TV. I didn't feel like sleeping and wanted to watch the news. On the news, I saw the headline, "Murder stopped by local vigilante." What I didn't expect, though, was to see footage of the fight. He'd been discovered. In my haste to save that man's life, I hadn't checked my surroundings. Fear and regret slowly began to fill me. I had been too careless. My face was visible, and although covered by my glasses and fake beard, it would still be obvious to anyone who knew me. The camera was at an angle. It didn't capture the knife piercing me. At least some of my abilities remained unknown. Thank goodness I had no friends. The only person who knew my face well enough to make the connection was the old woman, but she hadn't actually seen the news. Regardless, I would need to find a new place to live as soon as possible. I began to calm down. I needed to rest after such a long day. I didn't want to ruin my schedule. After sleeping through the night, I woke up and dressed for my training. I grabbed my bag and headed straight to the beach. I always carry my lifeguard costume with me. Something I don't like is about to start. Summer vacation is almost over, and soon I'll have to go back to school. It seems like a waste of time, but I can't ignore it. I still want to get an education and integrate into society. I've thought about becoming a hero, but I'm undecided. I still have time to decide my future. I don't like rushing things. I haven't had much fun lately, always training and defeating villains. I should set aside some time to play games and read manga. Last year, I needed to get used to my new power, and now I can relax a little. Even though I said that, I'll continue to make my training harder. I need to reach a point where I'm satisfied. I want to be in peak physical condition. POV narration. Police Chief Kenji Tsurigami sat at his desk reviewing reports about the recent vigilante who had emerged in Mizutofu. He was worried that the vigilante's recent surge in popularity might encourage others to take more reckless actions. From the security camera footage, he'd seen that the vigilante Yellow Flash lived up to his name. He thought the villains were just exaggerating their experience with him, although he couldn't understand why the villain hadn't moved out of the way for that attack. He assumed he was wearing a protective vest under his suit. There was no blood at the scene besides the victims and the villains. However, now, with the revelation of this short but somewhat chaotic battle, all doubts were thrown out the window. His blinding speed was on full display for the world to see. Yellow Flash was rapidly gaining popularity in the eyes of the general public and notoriety in the eyes of heroes and the police force. He had to do something about it before it was too late. He decided to call on one of his youngest detectives, Naomasa Tsukachi. He wanted to give him a chance to prove himself. After all, he was fairly new to the police force in this area. Naomasa, I have something for you to investigate, he said immediately, not wanting to waste any more time than necessary. Yes, sir, Naomasa declared firmly. I trust you've been watching the news lately. I want you to find the identity of the vigilante known as Yellow Flash. The chief waited a moment and then continued. I'll have the appropriate documents sent to you. You must search our databases for any similarities in peculiarity and appearance. What should I do after I find him, sir? Naomasa was quite confident in his abilities. He knew that as long as the man was registered, it was only a matter of time before they found him. His peculiarity was quite unique, after all. When you discover his identity, you'll just give me a report. He paused, thinking for a moment. After that, he ended the phone call and called someone to give Naomasa the information required to begin his investigation. I'll need to contact some heroes to stop him. He told himself that if he trusted his subordinates' abilities, knowing that capturing this person would be difficult, even for most professional heroes. And so he sat there contemplating the best equipment to stop such a vigilante. Chapter 8. Daytime Light Show. Time skipped 2 years. Last month, I turned 13, and I couldn't help but think that my body physiology was somehow affected by my devil fruit. I was abnormally strong for someone without a strength-enhancing quirk. I was already 7 feet 10 inches tall, towering over most adults. During this time, I gained more muscle. It wasn't noticeable because of my recent growth spurts, but I was by no means skinny. My training progressed a lot. I went from barely being able to do 10 push-ups at the beginning to not even being able to do 500. These days, I need to add weights to my body to feel the stress of training. Weights shaped like heavy beach trash. My height made me much more recognizable, forcing me to completely avoid populated areas during my civilian life. The only place I couldn't hide was at school. I stuck out like a sore thumb. The only good thing that came out of school was that I got to see both Midoriya and Boku, since we were in different classes, but we still interacted. We all went to Aldera Junior High, so we usually hung out in the courtyard. With Boku, it's always something like, so what if you're tall? You're still just an extra. He usually tried to fight me, but I just put 2 fingers over his eyes and use a weakened version of Amaterasu. I didn't want to blind him. After all, I don't stay around for very long either, so by the time he recovers, I'm usually gone. With Midoriya, he usually just mumbles a hello. He's not very sociable. Sometimes I help him out when he's being bullied. After so many encounters with me, Bokuga knows I can be annoying, so he just leaves with his team when I get involved. The only time he genuinely tried to fight me, he was just dodging and using Amaterasu. My vigilante work didn't stop. I was very careful to avoid any more mistakes like last time. I'd basically turned my part of the city into a crime-free zone, while mostly some still acted despite my fame and notoriety. A prime example of this was the daytime robbers in front of me. It was a fairly sizable group, a gang of 13 thugs. However, only about 4 seemed somewhat experienced. The rest must have been recruited off the streets. I was watching them from a nearby rooftop. Around 7 of them used weapons. The others probably had offensive quirks. 5 people were holding the hostages together. They'd chosen 10 people who seemed to have the most harmless quirks. I heard sirens blaring, and police cars quickly surrounded the area. A police officer with a megaphone began negotiating with the robbers. One of the robbers seemed to have a voice amplification device. They went back and forth for a while, and I waited for a good moment to intervene. Meanwhile, some heroes started to appear. The only ones I recognized were Death Arms and the new pro hero, Kimui Watts. They also seemed to be waiting for an opportunity, obviously worried about the hostages. The police brought their getaway vehicles. They had requested 4 vans. The police had no choice but to comply. Then I heard them say the magic words. "We're coming out now, make way." When I heard that, I got ready. When they all came out, I realized they decided to take some hostages with them, but I didn't care. I floated above them, crossed my hands, and used Yasukani no Magatama. I wasn't worried about hitting the hostages. With my observation haki, I could only miss if I wanted to. As light erupted from my hands, lightning began raining down on the villains. They didn't even have time to react before being pierced by it. My goal was to incapacitate them, not kill them. And so, I used Yada no Kagami to quickly escape the scene, which was swarming with police and heroes. Fortunately, I was too fast for them to catch me. They didn't have anyone in their group who could counter me. I quickly reached a side street and slipped between the buildings, paths I knew very well, devoid of security and activity. I quickly changed and continued on my way. Kamui Watts' POV. Being a new hero during a hostage situation is stressful. As I stood there waiting for the negotiations to end and the hostages to be released, I couldn't help but grimace. We didn't have any other quirks that could subdue them quickly besides mine. Hopefully, my Arbor quirk should be enough. I just need to catch them when they're distracted. The negotiations went according to plan. All the villains were leaving. Even though they still had hostages, that was to be expected. Once they were all out, I was preparing to use the lacquered chain prison, but in the instant the last one emerged, a yellow light shone down on us. Most people looked up. All they could see was the light. It was like staring at the sun. Deadly laser beams began raining down on the villains. I instantly worried about the hostages' safety. After a few seconds, the assault ended. All the villains were falling to the ground, but the hostages were still standing. Looking up, I could only glimpse a yellow suit. The police acted quickly and took the hostages away from the wounded robbers. I'd heard the police talk about a vigilante in the past. This was the first time I'd seen him in action. Regardless of the legality of his activities, his skill was very impressive. After all, he already had more experience than I did. Unfortunately, the police force, and even most of the professional heroes, didn't share his opinion. They considered him a danger to others and to himself. The news media certainly didn't care how they portrayed the situation. It seems they only want the most sensational headline, without any regard for legal or social norms. As such, the headlines the next morning were, "Yellow, Flash strikes again," and "While heroes and police stand back, Vigilante saves the day." Only a few reporters who were closer to the police said anything positive about us. The rest just wanted to stir up controversy. This didn't bode well for anyone. It made the police and the heroes on the scene look incompetent, and at the same time, made them feel animosity toward the vigilante, even if it wasn't his fault at all. I can only hope they don't catch him this time. Chapter 9. Fighting someone strong. Lately, I've grown to hate the media more and more. Most of it is under All for One's control. Otherwise, I can't understand why they'd portray heroes in such a light. The robbery incident a week ago was just one of many. Stirring up controversy was one reason, sure, but they intentionally depicted heroes and the police as incompetent, almost as if they were trying to make the public lose faith in them. Too bad. Most people saw me as a hero. In their eyes, my name was synonymous with theirs. Now I'm running toward a commotion. I heard shouts as I walked toward my usual training spot, so I quickly put on my costume. When I arrived at the scene, I could see a team of heroes trying to fight a large, bulky villain. I immediately recognized the guy as Muscular. The ones fighting him were a man and a woman with water-related quirks. I can only guess they're the water hose duo. I remember them being dead in the anime. I can't recall much about the circumstances, but I'm pretty sure Muscular killed them. Before jumping in, I quickly blasted all the nearby cameras with a beam of light. The police already knew what I looked like in disguise. It was more of a formality, really. I could see the hero duo was already exhausted. They did their best. They held off this hulking lunatic long enough for the civilians to evacuate. Without wasting any more time, I flashed next to Muscular, using my heel to kick him through a building. He probably made it into an alley behind him, but he'd definitely be back. He was as angry as he was hurt. He burst out of the rubble, yelling curses and running toward me. When he reached me, his punch was already accelerating toward me. His muscles tripled in size, making his arm look like a giant muscle balloon. As he slammed into my torso, I jumped, stomped on his hand, and formed a powerful Ama no Murakumo in my hand, the same one I used to strike him in the head. There was no reason to hold back. Leaving him stunned and staggering, I used him as a platform and leaped backward, kicking a beam of light at him that threatened to pierce his stomach. He quickly used both arms to try to block the attack. Probably by reflex, his eyes could barely follow. The beam passed through his arms and exploded in front of his stomach, sending him flying backward. As he stood, curled up on his knees, clutching his stomach, I slowly approached him with my hands in my pockets. When I reached him, looking down, I stomped on his head and knocked it to the ground. He started yelling from under my shoe. "You villains sure are scary," I said with a sarcastic smile. "Honestly, Muscular, I expected a lot more from you. I guess you shouldn't expect anything from a delusional lunatic." I could feel his anger. It was boiling. He seemed to be trying to get up. Sighing, I put more force into my leg, slamming his head into the pavement. I stood there for a while, looking down to make sure he was out of commission. Then a jet of water came toward me from my side. Watching it, it seemed to be coming in slow motion. I simply took a step to my left and dodged it. Looking at the duo of heroes, they seemed strangely determined. "Stop, Yellow Flash. You have to come with us to the station. It's not too late for the police to pardon your crimes," Koda's father said, hoping to convince me to surrender. In a way, I wasn't wrong. Unlike other vigilantes, I never killed any villains. None died from the wounds I inflicted. Muscular was only unconscious, injured, but his wounds weren't life-threatening at all. The holes in his hands were cauterized when the light passed through them. He was unlikely to die, even if left alone. On the sidelines, I could see civilians and reporters taking pictures and filming the situation. I should take my leave now. Be careful, water hose. I left after saying that. Heroes were people I could respect. They upheld justice. In his first life, he had seen people compare Muscular to All Might, and while his strength was decent, his actual combat power was more than deficient. Overall, he felt that the only villain who could pose a threat to him was All for One himself. At this point, both he and All Might should still be recovering from their fight. The latter were appearing less and less in public view. I need to contact some people. POV narration. The recent incident with Yellow Flash and Muscular revealed quite a few things to Naomasa. He realized that Yellow Flash was completely peaceful when it came to heroes. It was somewhat reassuring. Many vigilantes tended to fight back when a hero tried to arrest them, but this one simply walked away, even going so far as to wish them well. Another thing he noticed was that his local vigilante seemed taller. In the past, he'd appear to be of average height, but the few villains who had seen him had reported that he was taller than in his only video depiction at the time. He hadn't taken their claims seriously at first, even after testing them with his quirk. He figured they were most likely just stunned when they saw him. Now he knew they were telling the truth. He needed to dig deeper into this. This case had haunted him for a long time, leaving a stain on his otherwise flawless career. The police chief didn't hold it against him. He realized there wasn't much evidence to begin with. There were no registered adults or teenagers with a quirk similar to the vigilantes. The trail that had gone cold now came back to life. The new sighting gave him an odd feeling, almost as if the person wanted to be seen. It led him to believe the vigilante was hiding something. With his speed, He could have left without being seen by any civilians, much less the press. Perhaps he destroyed the nearby cameras for some reason? Was he trying to make it seem like he was covering his tracks? That sounded unlikely to the detective, but there was no way he could know for sure. Chapter 10. The show is about to begin. Time skipped 2 years. 2 years have passed since my fight with Muscular. My daily life progressed, as usual. Thankfully, I stopped growing any taller. It was about time anyway. I was already as tall as All Might in his muscular form. Standing at 7 feet 2 inches was already impressive, but thankfully my physical strength grew along with my body. Training constantly pushed my body to its limits, at least the limits he could reach without any advanced equipment. There wasn't much I could do. Even lifting a car and using it as a training weight no longer worked. When I started training, I wanted to become as strong as Kizuru, without realizing how long it would take or what it would require. My quirk definitely affected my physical strength. Otherwise, I wouldn't have become so strong in such a short time. I realized in the past that my progress would eventually plateau. I just hoped it would happen later in life. Now that I was 15, I believed the plot was about to begin. It was only a matter of time. I wasn't going to interfere. I didn't need to save Bakugo since I knew he'd be fine. Today, I added something new to my vigilante costume. It was a sailor coat with shiny shoulder pads. The word justice was written in bold on the back, and I wore it like a cape. I wanted to add this for a long time. The reason I couldn't was because I had to save up a lot of money and find someone to create a custom outfit for an anonymous buyer. Now I stood there and watched a giant villain destroying some buildings. Recalling this scene, I realized that this was the debut of the heroine MT Lady, where she stole the spotlight from Kamui. If that was true, then Midoriya was somewhere behind the crowd of people watching the scene. I guess I'll put on a little show, since I could see MT Lady charging a growth point. I jumped onto the villain's head and poked his eyes with my fingers. Using Amaterasu at full power, blinding the villain, I jumped just as MT Lady kicked him. I could already see someone extending toward me. Obviously, I wasn't an enthusiastic fan. I leaped around Kemui's lacquered chain prison. Then, I felt MT Lady's hand reach out toward me, and I jumped onto it. Climbing up her shoulder, her cape billowing behind me, I started to get bored. Jumping onto another nearby building, I said, "Well, that was fun. See you sometime." They tried to stop me, but I was just toying with them. I moved away just as their combined attacks were about to hit me. I think I gave the media a good show, but the show was only meant for one person. Izuku should have seen the exchange. It left him some clues. I decided not to show up at school, to let things simmer for a while. POV narration. Midoriya was writing more information about the heroes in his notebook. He had seen the whole scene unfold. His encounter with the vigilante confused him a bit. The yellow flash seemed familiar. What was most troubling was one of the attacks he used. It was eerily similar to his friend Allan's. Perhaps his friend simply liked the vigilante, designing one of his attacks after him. Yes, that must be it. At first, he subconsciously chose to ignore the apparent similarity in height between the two. He didn't want to imagine his friend performing such dangerous acrobatics. On his way to school, he decided to talk to Allan. He needed to ask him some things. The more he thought about the vigilante, the more he began to compare the yellow flash to Allan. There were too many similarities. When Izuku arrived at school, he was a little late to his first class. He waited an hour to go see Allan, finding it difficult to concentrate on a lesson. During his lunch break, he tried to find Allan. When he arrived at his classroom, all he saw was Allan's empty seat, which only made him feel worse. After working up a courage, Izuku decided to ask one of his classmates if they knew anything about Allan. The answer he got was even more worrying. "Oh, Allan? He sometimes skips class. The teachers have gotten used to it because he still has the highest grades in our class," was the reply, which meant he wasn't always at school. What was he doing with his free time? And that's it. I'll bring you the next chapter soon. Leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed it.